Okay, we're going to continue with Asmachtas. Although I said I'm going to try to finish Asmachtas today and move on to Sivov Zayin next year, it looks like I'm going to have to split the Asmachtas into two shiurim now, this one into two. That was an Asmachta, exactly, and therefore we will do today Sif Yud Aleph and a bit on Sif Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, and then tomorrow, probably Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll do the next part, and Vov Zayin will just stay until afterwards. Sif Yud Aleph is again, we're going to be I'm focusing more on the Sa'ifim which come up in דיני on a regular basis. Sif Yud Aleph is the Machlekes Mechaber Ramon, something which also comes up quite often, and that is you have a Meichel and a Lekech, a seller and a buyer made an agreement on a sale. They already settled what's going to be the price, and then the buyer goes and gives the seller a mashkin. He tells him, if I don't complete the sale by this and this date, then my mashkin is nimchal, is forgiven, you could keep it. So to speak, he's taking upon himself a knas. Then the seller goes and says, okay, you're taking on a knas, I'm also taking on a knas. If I don't fulfill the sale, I'm doubling whatever your mashkin was. And now, if the seller retracts and backs out of his sale, there's no machlekes between Mechaber and Ramah. Both of them hold that the seller does not have to double the deposit, because that is an Asmachta. However, if the buyer retracts and changes his mind, according to the Mechaber, it's not an Asmachta and the seller acquires the mashkin. Why? Because it's tachas yadai, he already has it in his hands. And according to the Ramah, even in such a scenario, it's also an machlekes, it's also an asmachta. That is machlekes mechaber Ramah when the lekech changes his mind, even though the mashkin is already in the hands of the seller. The סימן Sifkot Chav Gimel explains the aside of this machlekes. Why is it that he holds that? He says that the Mechaber and the Ramah don't disagree whether it is an asmachta or not. They both agree that in both cases it is actually an asmachta. Even if the buyer changes his mind and doesn't come through with the sale, and he says that you keep the mashkin, it's still an asmachta. Elamais, why does the Mechaber hold that it is that the seller gets to keep it? He says, because over here you had two elements, you had a mechila, and it was already given to the seller. So, it's already in his rishus, and therefore that eliminates the asmachta by the mere fact that there was a mechila. Mechila eliminates an asmachta, and mechila together with the transfer of the erovin to the other person. Another important point that Smet points out over here is that we're not talking that the mashkin is a down payment. The mashkin is not going to be used towards paying for the purchase. It's only a mashkin, because if it's a down payment, then it falls into a whole different category, a whole different machlekes. And what's the old machlekes? Machlekes we discussed previously. If, according to the Mechaber, if he does not smach helvo al sadeyu, and he gives him a certain amount of money, he lends him an amount of money. If it's less than the value of the purchase, or it's then we say it's an asmachta. Why? Because we say it's an exaggeration. But over here, if it would be according to the Mechaber, if he gives him an erovin, which is a down payment towards the purchase, and it is on it's less than the price of what he's supposed to be purchasing, it's not an asmachta. Yeah. So.
Give up erovin supposed to pay later?
He's not paying later. According to the Mechaber, Asmechtã is only when there is an exaggeration. Right? That's what we learned previously. So over here, if somebody gives on a house, gives a down payment, and it's much less than the value of the house. So, and it's towards the purchase of the house, then according to the Mechaber, and it was supposed to go towards the purchase of the house, according to the Mechaber, it's not an Asmechtã. The way the Smeh explains it, it would not be an Asmechtã. The Ramah holds it is an Asmechtã. When it's a down payment?
Yeah.
The Smeh doesn't explain that. I think according to the Ramah, it would also not be an Asmechtã.
So why does he say that?
In which case, when it's a...
when it just gives a Eravin? Well, I don't know what this Eravin
no, the Eravin is not a down payment.
worth more?
Whether it is or it's not, that's not the point of here. It was not meant to be given as a payment towards the purchase.
So you plan to pay it
Besides that, and get the Eravin back. So he says, but if it would be just as a down payment, then it wouldn't be an Asmechtã for sure, according to the Mechaber. Why? Because he gave less than the value of the field. So what's going to be afterwards? It's Koine Keneged Moisav, according to the Mechaber. If he gave 10% down payment, all he does is he acquires the 10% that he gave. It's not an Asmechtã. L'chayir, according to the Ramah, it also not being an Asmechtã. Why? Because the whole reason why the Ramah says that less than that Hilvo al Sadeyu, and it's not the same value, or even if it is more than the value or less than the value, it doesn't make a difference. By Hilvo al Sadeyu, it is considered an Asmechtã. The Smeh over there explains the swear of the Ramah is because a person doesn't want to get rid of karkois. But over here it's moment, it's not karkois. So according to the Smeh also, according to the Ramah also, would not be l'chayir, would not be an Asmechtã. Anyways, now where does this come up? Many times, like I just mentioned, you sign a contract and you give a down payment, and the standard contract has that the down payment is considered liquidated damages. What's liquidated damages? A American concept that being that I cannot calculate how much a zekas I'm going to have by you not finishing the sale, means if the buyer is not going to follow through with the sale, I sign a contract with you for this and this price, and there's damages that it cannot be calculated later. Different kinds of damages, liquidated. So we are maskim meikara, we make a settlement between us that this is going to be instead of whatever damages are going to come up. That's our deal. So therefore, you lose a down payment if you don't if the buyer does not follow through with the contract based on his own moods. Now, sometimes the contract has a mortgage contingency that he has to be able to get a mortgage. He has to try and do whatever he can to get a mortgage. But this comes up a lot of times that a person is unable to close on the contract, and then the seller wants to keep the down payment. But there's another element that falls into play over here, and that is, and first of all, shayla if it's an Asmechtã or not. Why would it be a shayla if it's an Asmechtã or not? Because the down payment is towards the purchase, it's not a mashkin. But at the same time, you're not getting keneged moisav. So maybe it is an Asmechtã. But maybe it's biyadeh, right? But it's not really biyadeh, because when you give a down payment, it goes to an escrow agency. It doesn't go biyadeh of the seller. Escrow agency. He gives to a third party, a lawyer or whatever it is, holds the down payment until the time. And the lawyer has to release the down payment.
That's more like the base.
That's more like the base. Right? Now, the Ramah says over here that even if his pisoi biyad, in this if, even if it's pisoi biyad shalish, it's still considered an Asmechtã. Yeah, but that's talking about an eravin, not about a down payment. But again, the down payment is supposed to be connected myself. So that really rolls into what's going to be in the next seif. Now, the Taz interestingly says, medayik from the Ramah, from the Mechaber, that since the Mechaber used Ervoini Mochul, Lashon Mechila. Mechila doesn't apply unless it's only Mois and not a Chayfetz. Because by a Chayfetz you have to say Matane, Nesuna L'cha, not Mochul. Mochul is only a Lashon that's used by money. So therefore, the Raven that he's giving over here, even though technically it could be used for the purchase, it's not used for the purchase. He explains it's not used for the purchase. And the Mechaber used the Lashon Ervoini Machol because he's talking about an Raven which is cash. And Elamai, and if it's a Chayfetz, the Mechaber doesn't have to tell you that you have to say Lashon Matana. Whatever, whichever Lashon you used whatever Lashon Amoyel that you had to use at that point. So the Taz points out, he says, just you should have in mind that the Lashon Mechila doesn't work for this. That's going to point at three interesting nekudas before I jump into Sifid. We're trying to get to Asmachta. They're not directly connected to Seif Yud Aleph. Some of them are a little bit more connected, some of them are less connected, but just stuck them in here before we go on to the next topic. First is the Knesset Agdela Goy Satura Ispeiches. It brings the tshuva of the Ravid. If he does not say Lashon Mechila, he doesn't say Revoini Machol, and he doesn't say Me'achshav, right? But rather he gives the mashkin, and he says, if I don't pay you on time, Yehei Shalcha, it becomes yours. Then it's considered a Asmachta. And the Ravid says, even if he already gave it to him. That means that what the Mechaber says, the shittus of the Mechaber, that the Mechaber is basing himself on, that when you give something in the Rovin, it becomes, it adds to it, it has to be together with Lashon Mechila. And that's what probably the Mechaber is basing himself on. Now, another interesting thing in the Knesset Agdela Goy Satur Ois Kufhei, he brings the Tshuva Mari Ben Lev, that if also comes up a lot, and the Knesset Agdela just throws it in a line and a half. Someone makes a commitment that he's going to, someone borrows, and he has a payment plan. He has to pay every month a certain amount of money. Now, I'm not talking about ribis. Regular loan, I'll lend you $100,000, and I'll lend you $60,000. And it's a 5-year loan. Every month you have to pay me $1,000 over 5 years. But I make it, and every month I have to pay you the first weekday after the Chodesh. And I have 3 days to cure the default. That's how it's called. It will become default if you don't pay on time. 3 days to cure the default to pay until the 3rd day afterwards, until hay of the month. And if not, everything becomes due at that moment. Standard in a lot of loans. You chayav it at the moment. So if I paid for a year and a half, $18,000 a month, $1,000 a month. Now how much I have left? I have $34,000 left to pay. And I pay, and I don't have to pay everything on the spot. It all becomes chayav right away. Standard nusach. You would think it's an asmachta. It's not. Everything. He says it's not considered an asmachta. He doesn't explain, the Knesset doesn't explain why. You look at the Marival, you'll see the reason. But logically speaking, because he's not paying anything extra, and it's going to go, it's like gozim, and there's no loss. Now, another interesting thing this is not in the Knesset Agdela, but this is in another two from the same style of Knesset Agdela, is Mata Shimon and Banechaye. Mata Shimon, Agoy Satur Ois Ayin Tes, brings from the Sefer Mas As Moshe, that any taina of asmachta, that a person could taina and doesn't taina, tanin ali. It's like we're tanin ali Yerushin, tanin ali Lekech. We're tainin for him. Asmachta is something which the Bezdin has an obligation to taina for the person, even if he doesn't say it. We become his tayin. And this is what the Mata Shimon says. One shitta he brings. And he tells you, go look in Banechaye. Banechaye is earlier. It's similar to it's between the Knesset Agdela and the Mata Shimon. There's the Banechaye. You have the Knesset Agdela, Banechaye in generational order. Knesset Agdela, Banechaye, Mata Shimon, and something Shloim. I forgot the last one. And Dvar Mishpat. And there's a bunch of other ones, but they're not connected to this. So Knesset Agdela doesn't clearly mention it. The Mata Shimon, who's after the Banechaye, brings the Masas Moshe and says, and look at the Banechaye. When you look at the Banechaye, Goy Satur Ois Yud Gimel, he brings the Machlekes. According to the Mabit, we don't say Taninan. According to the Marashdam, we do say Taninan by Asmachta. But the Matar Shimon just points out to you to tell you, this is how he points out to you, he tells you, you look in Banechai, you'll see there's a machlekes, but I'm only bringing to you Masas Moshe. Because La Halacha, I saw the Banechai, I know those people, I'm telling you La Halacha, we say Taninan. He's Machriya, we say Taninan. It's an interesting klal to remember when it comes to דיני Asmachta. Let's move on to Sifyud Beis. I'm going to focus on Sifyud Beis a little bit different than standard. I'm not going to go into any of the Neisa Kalim, Kemat nothing. I just want to tell you there's like this. Sifyud Beis talks about someone who gives a shtar in the hands of a shalish. He already paid part of the chayv. He paid a third of the chayv, he paid a quarter of the chayv. He tells the shalish, if I will not pay the rest of the chayv until this and this day, give the shtar further to the malva. And the time passed. Do not give the shtar to the malva. Why? Because it's an asmachta. Now, what's an asmachta? Is giving the shtar an asmachta? No. Because giving the shtar just allows the malva to be teveya the whole chayv. The question is on the loss of money that he already gave as a debt. Because if a person owes $100,000 and gives $25,000 already paid towards the debt, and he says, if I don't pay the other 75, then give the shtar further, then these 25,000 that he lost, that's an asmachta. That's the swat over here. He's going to lose that 25. And that's what the shach comes and says. Shach right away comes and discusses it, and he says, will it work if you do it in a way that you mevatel the asmachta? For example, if you say that the money, if you tell the shalish that the money that I was already given is a matana, then maybe it's not an asmachta, because he already says it's a matana. Yehi matana. Or if he gives the shtar directly to the hands of the malva, not to the hands of the shalish, maybe that's also not considered an asmachta, because it's biyauri. That's what Shach says. The Alter Rebbe takes this in Hilchis Eidus Ushtaris V'Shalishus, and now, last year we spoke about the Shtaris part of this Siman, now we're going to talk about the Shalishus part of the Siman, which is the Shalishus part of the Siman. Shalish. Starts in Seif Mem Aleph, this discussion. And the Alter Rebbe takes a very extreme, we'll call it extreme approach to this Shalishus. It's not in the white booklet, I forgot to put it in there. But it's in the Shulchan Aruch. It says Sif Mem Aleph and Beis Mem Gimel. In Mem Aleph, the Alter Rebbe just quotes what it says in the Sif. And he says, and why is it an asmachta? Very simple. Why is it an asmachta? Because the person actually thought Samach Daita is going to be able to pay on time, and therefore, there's no Gomer Vehikna to the Malva. Not the money, not the shtar. Either or, whichever way you want to look at it. Then the Alter Rebbe continues in Sif Mem Beis and says like this. The Alter Rebbe always puts a thing and says, yeah, we'll say, when is this talking about? When it's a davar hayadua shasmachta hizu v'lei gamar v'ikna. Has to be a known thing that it's not asmachta. But if the shalish has a suffix whether it was an asmachta, one suffix he has, maybe it wasn't an asmachta. Or he's mesupik if the loiv is going to be taining tainas asmachta. That's very interesting, he puts this as a suffix. Because here we see it's the exact opposite achroe from the Matar Shimon. The Matar Shimon tells you that tanin and asmachta. The Alter Rebbe says you have a suffix, maybe he's going to tain asmachta, which means we don't say tanin.
He's not taining. He's a dain could.
Yep, could be because he's not a dain, can sein. But if he says he's mesupik, if when he's going to come to bed, he's going to tain asmachta or not. But if, according to Matar Shimon, if he's mesupik, he's going to tain asmachta or not, who cares? As long as it's an asmachta, he could tain it, the best not to be tain it for him. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't mention it. Being that in such scenarios, the suffix maybe is going to be makne belev, maybe it was gomer makne belev shalem. Why? Because maybe he believes they of the additional amount of money. Then, or another suffix, the shalish knows that the loiva has a taina. Maybe asmachta, maybe a different taina, maybe sitroi, who knows, whatever taina he has. However, the shalish has a suffix whether this taina is going to be a taina which is going to be strong in bezdin, or it's not going to be a winning taina. Then misafik, since he's a shalish and not a dayan, misafik, he has to do what he was told to do, which means he's giving it to the malva in any of these scenarios, whether he has a suffix if it's an asmechtã, or he knows it's an asmechtã but he's not sure if the guy's going to taina asmechtã, or he knows the guy's going to taina asmechtã but he doesn't know if he's going to win with this taina. Any form of suffix, the shalish has to fulfill his responsibility and do what he was told. Elamai, when he does it, he has to do it in front of Eidim, and he has to give them a whole history. This is how it came to my hands, and etc. And I think basically the Alter Rebbe doesn't mention it, but it seems like he also has to tell him where the suffix is. Why is he giving it to him? Like, just say the whole story.
He doesn't say the reason why he's giving it.
The Alter Rebbe doesn't say that, but that's mashma, that's part of the story. And then the Eidim will write him a zettel that this is what happened, and they'll give it to him to the shalish. But he says, do not give the zettel to bezdin. You were not ordered to give the zettel, the shtar to the bezdin. Why? If you're going to give it to bezdin, bezdin's not going to give it to the malva. Bezdin's going to hold it. They're going to say, oh, there's two sides to every story. Let's hear what it is. So you violated your achrayus, your responsibility, your contract. You were told to do something, so you have to do what you were told. You have sfeikus, fine, so tell the Eidim this is what he's sfeikus, that's what you gave it. But you have no right to go to Bezdin and make an action which is going to change the status of what was supposed to be done. That's Sifman base. Continues Alter Rebbe Sifman Gimel. Now, what happens if the shalish knows that one of them is going to for sure win in Bezdin, Betana Isov? So it's not that he's mesupik if the tainas are going to be strong or not. He knows he's going to win. It's a winning argument. So now the shalish just gives it to whoever he knows is going to win in Bezdin. And the other person can't have any tainas against him. Elamai, don't give it to him in front of Eidim. Give it to him in front of Bezdin. And in front of Bezdin you'll say the whole story, and Bezdin will write you a zettel. Why? Because if there's going to be a denial afterwards, there's going to be an argument afterwards. Was the shalish told kach, or was the shalish told kach? Did he do like this, or did he do like that? The shalish, once he releases the shtar, loses his nemanis. The shalish has limited nemanis time frame. He is neman as long as the shtar is in his hands. The moment the shtar is no longer in his hands, he loses all nemanis to say what happened. So therefore, even if he holds that therefore, before he gives the shtar to Bezdin, he has nemanis. He tells him the whole story, and there he has 100% halachic nemanis, and they write everything down. Now it's signed and sealed with nemanis. He gives the shtar, he loses all nemanis. But now he already has a paper that he said it while he was writing neman, and therefore, if there be any argument, it'll be fine. Who holds it settled? The shalish. In case people come after him. That's Mem Gimel. Comes from Dalad and Mem Hey, the Alter Rebbe's.
Why is not enough?
Because here he's doing it, and his understanding is the Bezdin is going to be mezaka this person based on the tainas. That's how I understand the Alter Rebbe. So therefore, can't come to Eidim and say, I believe this is going to be. You come in front of Bezdin, you tell them this is the taina, I know he has a taina, I know it's a winning taina. Bezdin couldn't argue with him and tell him it's not a winning taina. That's why I think you need Bezdin there. I think. I'm not 100% sure that's the reason, that's how I think it is. In Sifrim Dalad Mem Hey, it's a different discussion. What happens at Shalishas? It's not that it was partially paid. It is that the Shalish was given a shtar choiv, that if the loive is not going to pay the malva by a specific time frame, then give the shtar choiv to the malva. So the Alter Rebbe says, if the time has passed, then you don't have to ask any questions. You give it straight up to the malva. Why? Because the loive knows that the shalish has it. If the loive would pay, he would make sure the shalish is aware of it. The fact that he didn't pay in front of the shalish means that he didn't pay. And since he didn't pay, you could just give it without doing any research. But if it's before Zman Piroin, and the Malva comes back and says, I want to get the shtar, even if the Malva is the one who gave the shtar to the Shalish, and he's the one who made this condition, still cannot give it back to the Malva. Why? Because the Alter Rebbe then explains it in brackets, that what happened over here? Why did the Malva give this document to the Shalish? Maybe even without the Leiva knowing. Because the Malva wanted to extend the time of Piroin. According to the Shtar, the time of Piroin was this and this day. He gives him the Shtar and he tells him, if in 6 months he doesn't pay, give me the Shtar back to collect. I don't know, I put pressure on him. So he was Marchiv Zman Piroin. He gave him an extension of time. And the extension was without any conditions. The Leiva wasn't there. He doesn't tell him, I'm extending the time if you do kach v'kach, if you don't do kach v'kach. It tells the Shalosh, I'm extending the time. So therefore, there's no Asmachta, because there was no Tnai. You just extended the time. It's like a regular thing. I'm extending the time without anything. So now, who does the shtar belong to during this time? Not the Malva. The Leiva. During that time, technically, it belongs to the Leiva. Without a kinyan. Why? Because the Leiva is muchzak b'ma'isav. Yeah, he's muchzak in the money he has to pay, but he doesn't have to pay it because there's no zman peroin. The shalish is holding the shtar on his behalf until he pays the money that he has to pay. But it all belongs to the Leiva. So the shalish giving it to the Malva is essentially taking something which belongs to the Leiva and giving it to somebody else. He's not allowed to do that. And then Alter Rebbe then goes from that. He rolls into, okay, but I mentioned that there's no Tnai, so I'll stick already. But if there is a Tnai, so he says, and now the Shalish thinks that the Tnai was fulfilled and therefore he could give it to the Malva. And Alter Rebbe says, sometimes the Tnai has Asmachtas. So, and the person who made the Tnai could change his mind. Sometimes the Tnai does not have Asmachtas, and the person who made the Tnai cannot change his mind. Therefore, if you are a Shalish, tzarich li is a Shalish baki b'din Asmachta heitev. Why? Because a Shalish who's going to release something, when there is a Tnai, has to know whether this Tnai is something which has an Asmachta or not. Because if this Tnai is for sure not an Asmachta, he could release the shtar. If it nice for sure, yes, an asmachta, you have the force fakers that we mentioned before. So if you become a shalish, you have to know better than the dayanim. Shalish. Shalish is a common thing. Every escrow agent is a shalish. Explain. Every person who holds something from behalf, when I give a down payment to purchase something, who's giving it? Can I give it to the owner? No. Giving it to a third party, to a lawyer. Escrow agent. The concept of escrow agent. There's laws. Why is that made like that? Why is that made like that? So that way, people don't get greedy and take money, and then you have to go chase them in Bezdin to get the money out or in court. You're saying people are going to start taking money out? Yeah. So there is. Sometimes you have disputes. Many times you have disputes, and there is. The shalish, the shlishas. Doesn't control the transaction. This is not this shalishas. Doesn't control the transaction. He has a contract that says you release it if this and this is fulfilled, or this and this date, or this and this thing. So whatever happens. Tell you, I have a friend who's a Rav Chavrusa, who's a Rav Roshi and Rav Bezin in a certain place, and he has big rich people over there, and he tells me that in the safe in his office, on average between $50 and $60 million in cash. Cash. Or whatever, like documents that there is. He's the shalish. Yes. We're talking about not in America. In America, all money's in the banks. Talking about outside America, where people will have everything is not in. He says it's $50 to $60 million sitting in his safe on a regular day, in cash and other instruments, whatever it is, in shove cash. Huh? No, this isn't something. There's disputes. But he has it over there. And he's talking about b'din asmachta hitev. Das weiß ich. I know him. It's an in-between who has ne'emanus, and he has to do what's done. But that's Sif Yud Beis. Let's move on to Sif Yud Gimel, which is where big asmachtas come into play. The Mechaber in Sif Yud Gimel says, regarding asmachtas, hu adin in every t'nai, that people make a deal between themselves, imiyem lo yiyeh. If they make a t'nai imiyem lo yiyeh, even if it was done b'shtar or be'edim, being that there's a smichus das im lo yiyeh, maybe it's not going to happen. So there's no gmirus das of gomar v'hikna, therefore it's an asmachta. The Smer right away points out, in Sifkot Nechav Ches, this is even, according to the Mechaber, even if they did a kinyan, being that when you did the kinyan, your gilui das is that the main thing is for fulfilling the Tanai and not for hakna, and not to transfer ownership from one person to another, it still remains an asmachta. That's the Mechaber, very simple. Imiyem lo yiyeh is an asmachta. Weiter gefor, based on the Rambam. Yeah, that's the Beis Yosef on this. If you look in the Beis Yosef, which we're going to touch upon later, it's a Beis Yosef. In our prints, it says Tezvav Tezayin Yud Zayin Yud Ches in little parentheses. This is like 3 together. It's about 4 pages long. And they go through all the shittas. Comes the Ramah and says, yes, that there's 3 different ways to look at it. Some of the shittas of the Yeshayimrim are in the Tur, some of them are in the Beis Yosef. What are the 3 ways of asmachtas? First, if it's tolui biyad acherim, but not tolui b'cha, not tolui boy. That means the person who's making the condition does not have control on what's going to happen, and it's dependent, but somebody else does have control on what's going to come out, on the outcome. What is that? Then it's an asmachta. The Ramah says an asmachta b'chol inyan. This is the Mechaber will for sure agree with this, because this is imiyem lo yiyeh. The Ramah is the first example in the Ramah. What's the example? He tells him, it's an example from the Gemara. Go buy wine and this in this place. And if you're not going to buy wine, you will pay me a knaus. Kach v'kach. Then it's an asmachta. Why? Because maybe they're not going to sell to him over there. Just go buy wine in the next town over. The Smeh explains what are we talking about over here. The Smeh says simply, that town is the wine is cheap. That's why I'm telling you, go buy wine in that town. Maybe they're not going to sell it to him. Now, being that it's totally b'das achedim, who is the das achedim? The seller in the other town. So therefore, there was no gemirus das from the person who accepted upon himself a knas. It's actually going to be because he relied. There's going to be a sale in that location. Comes in the Sivas HaMishpat, in Chidushim Sifkot Lamed Beis, and in Biurim Sifkot and Tes. It tells you an interesting thing. Being that this case is an asmachta from the first moment, because it's totally b'das acherim, that means tchilosei b'asmachta. So if this guy went to the other town, and he wanted to sell him, and he was stomach b'yisheya and didn't buy, and he comes back, he's still potter. Why? So there was never a kinyan to begin with. It was never chal. And then he says, and if we're talking about that there's a shar kotzuv, a set shar which doesn't change in that town, so then there's no im yirtzim lo yirtzulim kerloi. Because the way seems like the way the Nesivos understands it, it's that maybe the price is going to change, and they're not going to want to sell it to him at that price. Right, but if it's a shar kotzuv, they're going to sell it to him at that price. Yeah, everybody knows in America you have those massive lawsuits about somebody who wanted to buy a birthday cake or a wedding cake for a gay marriage, and said you have to serve it. And according to American law, you can't discriminate against customers. You're a religious Christian. Too bad. There's a big lawsuit about it. I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that, 8 years ago. Huh? You didn't get the case?
The case was the case.
Which? In Shulchan Aruch or in court?
No.
According to American law, yeah, what's the name of the thing? What was the name of the case? Something, what was the name of the cake store? The famous thing. According to American law, if I walk into a store, you can't discriminate against a person. This is a bakery that's owned by religious Christians. They refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple.
Oh.
They refused. Now, and they got sued. They claimed religious freedom. Now, they were both, the purchaser was stump trolling the Christians because he knew that they didn't want to do it. He could have gone to a fry bakery. Why dafka go to a frum bakery? Haftzalachas. That was a big court case. I don't know what the maskana was. I remember when it started, I don't remember the maskana, but I just remember there was a court case. But that is, mamish totally b'das acherim, yeah? You send a guy to buy a thing, and there's a shar kotzu for a cake, the price is on the window, shemalayim krulay. You know? It's asmachta. Anyways, yeah, so he says, so now if it's a shar kotzu, it doesn't change, the Nesivus tells you, go look at what I wrote in Kuf Pei Gimel Sif Aleph. What does the Nesivus over there talk about in Kuf Pei Gimel? Kuf Pei Gimel is talking about when I send somebody to buy something, a shliach, and he doesn't fulfill the shlichus. And I got a loss out of it. So over there, the Nesivus says that if I send somebody to buy something in another town, there's a shar kotzuv, a set price, and I told him to buy, and he didn't. And anybody else who went to that town was able to buy it for that price. And I see that everybody bought. This is the only bottle who didn't buy. Then he's chayev, v'niyas harevach. He's chayev for whatever profit I could have made from this thing. Why? Because it's biyadei lasos. He's able to do it. But if there's no shar kotzuv, that's what he tells you to look over there. So Mashmo says if there's no shar kotzuv, as we're talking about over here, because the price might change, then it's fine. Pischei tshuva in Sifkot and Tazayim brings the tshuva from the Chavas Yoid, which I'm going to deal with a little bit later. I'm only pointing out one nekuda from it, and it's the right column of the Pischei tshuva, about 3 or 4 lines from the bottom. It's in between that tshuva from the long tshuva of the Chavas Yoid. Over there he explains, it's mashma that, what are we talking about? That you sent him to buy it in Shar HaZoil. And therefore, why is it an asmachta? Because maybe Ishtana Ashar, by the time you get there, the price is going to change. Right? That's how he explains it. The price might change. Which means that, according to the Chavas Yoed, it seems like that if the shar could change, even if it's a shar kavua, but the shar could change, it's always an asmachta. Why? Because it could change. According to the Nesivus, a shar kavua, even if it could change, but if it's a shar kavua, then it's not an asmachta. If we see that other people bought at that shar kavua, it's not an asmachta, it's considered a pesheya. And if it's a shar she'enoi kavua, then it's always an asmachta, even meikara, and it's potter. And so according to the Chavas Yoed, you're going to soon see that if it's not something kavua, but there was oinus, is also machlekes if he's going to do or not. Let's put this aside for a second, because we're talking about eina biyado, toli b'das acherim, toli b'yad acherim. Comes the Bach with a big question. How can you say that toli b'das acherim is an asmachta? Moshe Rabbeinu T'nai God Bnei Reuven, which was what all the דיני Tnoim are learned out of, is Im Yavru Im Lo Yavru, the next generation, or 10 generations from now. It's totally b'das acherim. So how was he able to make such a T'nai? So the Bach says, well, you could say it was a B'fnei Bezdin Choshev. The most Choshev Bezdin in the history of Bnei Yisrael was Moshe and the Skenim, Moshe and Bnei Yisrael. So obviously it was B'fnei Bezdin Choshev. It was in front of everybody. That's one. Number 2, you could say maybe it was Machshav. Number 3 comes the Bach, and this is the teretz the Bach likes the best. Midiraisa asmachta is not koina, only midirabanan. Why? Because the Orev, which is an asmachta, is mishtabed midiraisa. So therefore, is that raya that midiraisa asmachta kanya. Only midirabanan asmachta le kanya. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was following midiraisa, not midirabanan. And therefore, the asmachta was koina. Comes the Shach and Sifkot and Yitches and says that the words of the Bach are divrei nevios. I don't understand what he's saying. It's not shaykh to say that. Why? Because what's the reason why Arav is mishtabed? Not because it's asmachta, because Bahi Anoe, because he enjoys the fact that people trust him, he's mishtabed. Not because midiraisa yekaina, and he leaves it as a shaila in the Bach. The Nesivis in Biurim Sivkot and Tezvav says the Bach is doch based on the Mordechai. I'm surprised the Shach missed the Mordechai. And it's clear that midiraisa asmachta is kaina. And he says, why is that? Even if you're going to say that midiraisa asmachta is loikanya, and only behai hanoi gomaru makna, that doesn't help for deiraisa. Why? Because by deiraisa, safek kinyan is nishkin kinyan. So therefore, this hai hanoi, being that it's a safek, at least you could say it's a safek asmachta. And if you say asmachta midiraisa leikanya, so this will always be a safek. It will be a safek deiraisa, safek kinyan is nishkin kinyan. Not like that abanan. So therefore, the only way that an Arav is kind of behai hanoeh is only if he says asmachtas midiraisa. That's the teretz of the Nesivis. Pischat Shuvas of Kotten Tezvav takes an easier approach. Machlekes Rishonim if asmachtas kani midiraisa or not. I'm not going to go into it. If you look in the Erech HaShulchan, the Brown to Tayyeb, Sifkot Lamed Beis, has 4 pages on this. If it's deraisa derabbanan, I'm not going to go into it now. I'm going to go into Shoshanas Yaakov, which takes a little bit similar approach to the Sivis, but a much geschmacker chiddush. He says the Bach was forced to say that midiraisa asmachta is kaina, and midrabanan it's not kaina. And why was he forced to do it? Because of the Arav. And why because of the Arav? Because hay hanor and the shibud. Why? He says, this idea that behai hanor you're mishtabed can only be used for the element of shibud. You want the Arav to be mishtabed, you have to explain why he's mishtabed. But it doesn't help you with the idea of a kinyan. And it doesn't eliminate asmachta. It only helps to add a shibud on you. It adds a shibud on you, but doesn't eliminate the asmachta, because you can't use one thing for 2 things. Elamai, the shibud midra is therefore what you're going to say. If the hay hanoim meshabadatoi, if you say it's mevatel da asmachta, then you have no shibud. So therefore, what's the shibud based on? He says the shibud is based on kinyan oidisa. Hamoide that I'm mishtabed. So therefore, it's based on oidisa. Now you have a problem. Oidisa, we already learned a few shiurim back, a few simanim ago, it's only midrabanan, not midiraisa. So if you're going to say that the whole idea that the Arav is mishtabed is only based on oidisa, and oidisa is only midrabanan, the Raisa doesn't hold the Vedisa. So you're stuck again with the Arav has no shibud. So therefore, he says as midrabanan asmachta lekanya, that we know. And therefore, you need oidisa for the shibud. Kinyan oidisa. And the hay hanoi element is for bittul asmachta. Because midrabanan asmachta doesn't work and oidisa works. So you use the hay hanoi to mevatel the asmachta, and you use the oidisa to enforce the shibud. But midiraisa there's no oidisa. You only have hay hanoi. So the hay hanoi could be used either for shibud or for asmachta. So you have to use it for shibud because you have no oidisa. So therefore, for the asmachta you're stuck. So you have to say the asmachta is midiraisa, is kaina. That's the explanation of that the Bach was forced to say, because of Arav, the Bach was forced to say that it's midiraisa. The midiraisa is asmachta is kanya. But stam, if you look in the Piskei Dinim of Tzemach Tzedek in Dibur HaMaschil Tur Sif Yutes, it's a short one, Tur Sif Yutes, I'm not going into it now, it's in the page 194 of your book. Towards the end of that Dibur HaMaschil, it's pretty clear that he holds that you cannot say that Asmachta, according to the Rosh, Asmachta is kind of midiraisa, like the Bach wanted to say, and he takes the approach of the Shach. I'm not going into it now. That is the first chiluk of the Ramah. Second chiluk of the Ramah, in Asmachta, second din. If it's something which is fully biyadei lases, he's able to do it and he's not exaggerating. For example, it's not Asmachta. For example, he says, I'm going to take this field from you and I'm going to work it like I'm supposed to. And if I don't, I will pay you all the losses that you will incur because of my carelessness. I'll pay you b'meita from the best of my fields. And Itaka didn't do his work. It's not an asmachta. Why is not an asmachta? Because there's no exaggeration. That's what the Sma explains it. What does it mean there's no exaggeration over here? You look in the Nesivis, he defines it, gives a nice agdara for it, in Biurim Sivkot Yud. What does it mean no exaggeration? I'm doch losing money. By me taking upon myself a knas, I'm losing money. He says, no, I'm losing and the other guy's also losing. If I'm losing and he's losing, it's not a guzman. He's losing because his field didn't grow. I'm losing because I have to pay something for it, right? So because in such a thing, either I'm losing, you're losing, so it's an asmacht. It's not an asmachta. It's not a guzma, sorry. And the same, and in Chidushim Sifkot Lamed Gimel he adds, and what happens if it's not a guzma and neither of them lose? I'm sorry, no, it says, and if it's not, before we go to Chidushim. And in the same Biurim Sifkot Yud, and if it's both lose, both don't lose, not he doesn't lose and his friend doesn't lose, it's also not an asmachta. Because they're both equal. Asmachta is when I'm going to lose and you're not going to lose. Or I'm not going to lose and you're going to lose. That's an asmachta. When it's biyadei. Now in Chidushim Sifkot Lamed Gimel he adds that he says if it's a case when it's not a guzma and it's also biyadei, then even if you were nanas, there was a oinus shchiach, and therefore he was not able to fulfill his t'nai, he is still chayev, still responsible, even be'oinus. Now let's roll back to the same Pischei Teshuva we spoke about before, Sifkot and Tazayin, which I mentioned before, and now I'm going to go into the story. It seems like again a disagreement with the Nesivis. True from the Chavas Yoir, if one person, what was the story? A person got married, and one of the things that was worked out is that his future brother-in-law is going to arrange for him a cheskas hayishuv, a srara in a certain town. How are we able to arrange a srara's jobs in towns? You paid for it. Yeah, not only today, and then also. You pay to get a title. And they made a kinyan. And they didn't say how much money is going to be spent to pay for it. Some towns you could pay a lot, some you could pay a little. And he didn't do it. The brother-in-law didn't do it. Comes the Choshen afterwards and tells take him to Bezdin. He didn't do what he was supposed to. There's certain knossos, whatever it is. Now the brother-in-law says, it's not biyadi. How am I able to control the other town hiring you? It's not biyadi. So the first svara is, being that there's not written how much money he has to spend to get it done, so it's biyadei mamash. Why is it biyadei? It doesn't say how much he has to spend. He could spend a yam of money. It doesn't say how much he has to spend. It says, I'm committing to get you this job in this town. Cheskas hayishuv.
Isn't that a guzma?
How much money it is? We'll soon see if it's a guzma or not. That's the conclusion of the Chavas Yair. So the Chavas Yair says, seems like it's an unlimited amount of money, so therefore it's not an asmachta and it's biyadei. So therefore he says, be'etzim it's not an asmachta. But if the brother-in-law worked hard to get this done, and he wasn't able to because the price that was required was much more than what the standard is for such a thing, then it's a oinus and he's potter. So here we see it's biyadei. He passes it's biyadei. It's not an asmachta, but he's potter midin oinus. Exact opposite of the nesivis, that if it's biyadei and it's not an asmachta, you're chayiv ba'insin. Yeah, now then the Rama continues that back to the thing, if it's biyadei but you exaggerate it, for example, you say if I'm not going to work the field, I'm going to pay you $100,000, then it's considered a asmachta. Then the Rama goes to the third chiluk. What's the third chiluk? He says, therefore, when a seller is makne to lekeach something with a condition, if you do kach v'kach, if you don't do kach v'kach, it's an asmachta. Why? If it's not totally b'das ha'moiche, b'yad ha'moiche, it's totally b'yad ha'lekeach. But if it's not b'yad, not b'yad ha'lekeach completely, that's not an asmachta. That's the whole example with the gambling, which I'm not going to get into it. And the Smeh says, why is it about the gambling? Why is it that it's not an asmachta? Because neither of them have something to be toila on what if they're going to win or they're not going to win. Mashenkin, by selling wine, you could be toila that you're going to buy the wine in that town because the taka selling. So over here, because you cannot be toila on anything, there was no soymech das on anything that could happen, that can't happen. Therefore, Gomer vehikna. The Nesivis HaMishpah, the Nesivis in Biaorim Sifkot Nidaf expands it a little bit, and he gives an example. He says, for example, what's an example? Forget about the gambling. Another example of Eina Biyadei Klal, which is not an asmachta. If I sell a field on condition it's going to rain. So on condition it's going to rain, it's not biyad this guy, it's not biyad that guy. Nobody can control the rain, and therefore it's not an asmachta, and it's kaina. And the Ramah then continues and concludes the Siman after we skip the whole gambling thing. It's not an asmachta unless the ikra davar is toloi in this condition, but something where the condition is not relevant to the actual core of the deal, then it's not an asmachta. For example, if a person says, I'm going to pay kach v'kach to you, and if you're dead, I'll pay it to your kids. So then, the ikra davar is a payment, but I'm going to pay anyways. So I'm having a discussion, am I going to pay it to you, or if you're dead, I'm going to pay it to you, Yoshim, it's not an asmachta. Because it's not the yesod it's not the core of the deal. To make it an asmachta, the condition has to be the core of the deal. If, for example, if you tell him, if you're alive, I'll pay you, and if you're dead, I'm not going to pay your kids, then that's something to argue about. But if he tells them, if you're alive, I'm going to pay you, and if you're dead, I'm going to pay your kids, then it's not asmachta. And then he concludes that in the kinyans, the machlekes, if a machlekes, even if you make each one made a kinyan to the other one, if by asmachta it works or not, I'm not going to get into it right now. Let's roll back now to the Tur and the Beis Yosef. I want to go into it for a moment. The Tur brings the Rambam. Yeah, and that's what the Mechaber also follows, that every Tanai that you say, Miyam lo yeh, is an asmachta. That's in the Mechaber Paskins, only brings the shit of the Rambam. The Tur asks, why does the Rambam not mechalik between biyadei ve'eina biyadei? And instead of answering why the Rambam doesn't do it, he actually brings all the people who disagree with the Rambam. And that's when he brings some of the chilukim that we have in the Ramah. And those are based on Taisvis and on Rabbeinu Yerucham and Rabbeinu Tam and Agoyes Mordechai and Rabbeinu Hagon and a bunch of other Rishonim, and the Beis Yosef goes and takes it apart in his 4 or 5 pages over there. The Tzemach Tzedek, this is where he goes through all these nekudas. If you look in the Tzemach Tzedek, it's on page 192. From page 192, where it says Beis Yosef Reish Seif Tezayin, all the way through till page 194, Tur Sif Yutes, is all on that one long Beis Yosef. And I learned through it. I'm going to tell you some of the points that are here. Even some of them I didn't quite fully understand, but I skipped some of them for that reason. But let's go. I'm going to point out a few nekudas that are there, and ten l'chacham v'yach kamoid. If you want to learn it, will be great. The first nekuda that the Beis Yosef, that Tzemach Tzedek brings. And that is in the first point, Beis Yosef Reish Sif Tezayin, a short one. The Beis Yosef, when he goes through all the shittas, brings in the name of Rashi. Why is it when I send to buy wine? Yeah, when I send you to buy wine, it's an asmechtã, right? But there is a case in the Gemara where it was not an asmechtã, and Rashi explains why is that? Because konem miyadei. The Beis Yosef brings that because of konem miyadei. The Tzemach Tzedek right away says konem miyadei is garnished because konem miyadei doesn't work by an asmechtã. We must say that it was a kinyan me'achshav, and me'achshav by itself also works for a asmechtã, but kinyan by itself doesn't work. That's the first point. Just points out, explains what Rashi says. First nekuda that Tzemach Tzedek points out. The next nekuda that Tzemach Tzedek points out, the next nekuda I'm going to be talking about is the next page in Beis Yosef. It says Beis Yosef Tezayin Nimtza Da'at Chilukim Hein. This is in the first section of the Beis Yosef, where the Beis Yosef goes and explains the different opinions. What? It's. I'll tell you which page it is in the book. That long Beis Yosef. Hold on. It's page Shinun Daled. Page Shinun Daled. The Beis Yosef starts over there and goes through all the way till the end of page Shinun Ches. So you have Shinun Daled, Nun Hey, Nun Vav, Nun Zayin, Nun Ches. 5 pages of Beis Yosef. That's Beis Yosef, Tezayin, Yud Zayin, Yud Ches. In the older prints, it was separated into Tezayin, Yud Zayin, Yud Ches, and Tzemach Tzedek is referencing them to Tezayin, Yud Zayin, Yud Ches. But in today's prints, it's all combined together, so it just makes it a little bit harder to find what he's talking about. But right in the beginning of this one, the first page, it says, Nimtza Da'at Chilukim Hein, yeah? And the Beis Yosef goes through differences, biyadei, ain't biyadei, etc. The first nekuda that the Beis Yosef brings is Shittas Rashi. The Beis Yosef says the name of Rashi. The Beis Yosef says that what's the first chiluk that he says in דיני Asmechtא from the Rishonim is when it's not biyadei klal. Yeah, but it's biyad acheli. If it's not biyadei klal, it's not biyad anybody else. Even if he's magzim, it's not an asmechtã. If it's ain't biyadei klal, which is the case of gambling. So Tzemach Tzedek says, l'cha'oida, what is this talking about over here? When he has a suffix a shakel, there's an equal suffix in his mind. Why is it there's no smichus? What's a no smichus das? Because by gambling we say, what is no smichus das? According to the Smei, you can't hang your hat on something. So Tzemach says, no, that's not what it is. It's a suffix shakel. Am I going to win or are you going to win? When it comes to gambling, I have nothing to rely on. Why am I going to win? And you have nothing to rely on why you're going to win. I have nothing to rely on why I'm going to lose. You have nothing to rely on why you're going to lose. So it's shakel from both ways. And in such a case, it's not an asmechtã, because he has no reason to hold one way or the other. So then Tzemach Tzedek says, we have to anyways, but now we're still left with a problem. Even if it's not an asmechtã, how was this person kinda the money that he won? In a simple way, before we get to daf and everything else that's later on in the sif. He says we have to compare it to breira. What's breira? That after, when it's over, there is a niv huvrar hadavar. It was proven which side already owned it milchatchila. He says, I must say, the only way it's going to work is if the milchatchila, the way it was done is that the kinyan, that it belongs to one of them, or to the other one. And at the end, that it belongs to this one and not to the other one. Because if you're going to say that the kinyan happens after a guy won, then it's an asmachta. That is on page 193, which is page 66 in the Tzemach Tzedek, Beis Yosef Sifta Zayin, the short one. Now comes a long one. Actually, no, another short one. The Ayin Beis Yosef Sifut Ches. It's also on page 193. Beis Yosef, well, the Tur also asks a question, but on the Rambam, why is not Mechalek? But the Tur, Beis Yosef asks on the Rambam, why does the Rambam not hold that be'enei beyodi klal, it's not an asmachta? This din of gambling, why doesn't the Rambam says that it's not an asmachta? It has a kasha. Tzemach Tzedek says, well, if you would look in the Kesef Mishnah, you'd see there's no question. Why? Because the Rambam Taka holds there's no asmachta. Elamai, according to the Ran, you have a problem. Because the Ran holds that the Rambam holds that it's that. The Kesef Mishnah holds, the Rambam holds that it's Taka and Asmachta. Taka and Asmachta, and that's why even by gambling it's an Asmachta. But the Ran says no, the Rambam holds that it's not an Asmachta. Elamai, so why is there a problem? Because there's an Isur, there's a specific Isur, because he's taking the money but derech schoik v'hitul. Because it's in a schoik v'hitul way, then a joking way, and that's what it is. So there's an Isser B'dover. Comes to Tzedek and says, the way the Rambam explains, the way the Ran explains the Rambam, that if it's Eine B'yodei Klal, it's only Asur if B'derech Schoik V'hitul, but really it's not an Asmachta. So therefore, if it's something Eine B'yodei Klal, but it's not B'derech Schoik V'hitul, so you don't have the Isur, it's B'derech Heter, and it's Eine B'yodei Klal. According to the Rambam, it should not be an Asmachta. So the question comes back, why didn't the Rambam? So he says, that's the only way to understand the Beis Yosef's question, based on the Ran, that Taka a question, why the Rambam didn't mention it. That's this Tzemach Tzedek.
Something a shackle like proving two people, like let's say there's 3 people gambling before, like would that make it not something a shackle?
No, it's still a Safek HaShakol, because each person has a 50-50 chance if he's going to win or not.
Each person?
Each person. Huh? Each person has a 50-50 chance he's going to lose all his money, he's going to win. Now, then comes in the next column in page 193, is a Beis Yosef must have a Yedea. Over here, this is what Tzemach Tzedek says, brings the Beis Yosef. Yeah, the Beis Yosef explains the Gemara that we already learned regarding Hilvo al Sadeyu, when a person lends money based on the field. Yeah, that we already learned the shit of the Beis Yosef, that only when Hilvo Yeser al Shoivye, when he lends him more than what it's worth, then it's Nasmachta. Why? Because there is a Guzma, because he exaggerated. But if it's b'shoivyo, if it's on its value, then it's not a guzme, and it's not an asmachta. Tzemach Tzedek says, seems from the Beis Yosef, quite simply, that he holds that even something which is biyodei ve'ene biyodei, means not biyodei mamish, it's biyodei ve'ene biyodei, it's also, if there is gazim, it's an asmachta. And if it's not gazim, it's not an asmachta. Which that doesn't fit with the Rabbi Yerucham, it doesn't fit with the Tur, it doesn't fit with the Rashi. It doesn't fit with the Rashi either. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, well, Rashi we could work with. Why? Because you could explain that Rashi holds that Hilvo al Sadeyu, it's biyodei legamri. Why is it biyodei legamri? Because I tell him, if I'm not going to pay you, and it's no good, it's not legazim. If I'm not going to pay you on this and this day, then you can get to keep the field. So it's biyodei mamash, because it's in my hands to pay you or not to pay you. So if it's biyodei legamri, and it's not a guzma, it's not an asmachta, according to Rashi. But the Tzemach Tzedek says that works if we explain Rashi. But the Beis Yosef can't explain this in Rashi. Why can't the Beis Yosef explain this in Rashi? Because the way the Beis Yosef understands Rashi is that whenever there is no guzma, it's not an asmachta, whether it's biyadai or eina biyadai, or biyadai veina biyadai, not any biyadai klal. Whether it's biyadai or it's partially biyadai. And that's why he holds that by hilvo al sadeyu, it's not a asmachta. Regardless, even if it's not biyadai mamash, it's biyadai veina biyadai, it's still not an asmachta because there was no guzma. So therefore, you can't say that he follows Rashi. So he says it's a different opinion. Yeah, that's how he understands. He says now I have a problem with the Tur. Why? Because the Tur holds that if it's biyadai veina biyadai, even when there's no guzma, it's still an asmachta. Yeah, in the case of the wine, it's still an asmachta, even if it's not a guzma. So why does he hold like the Rambam? The Tur holds like the Rambam that by ilvo al sadeyu for its value. He lent him money and he gave him the field for the value of the loan. It's not an asmachta. The chayr is biyadai ve'enei biyadai. And no guzma, it should be an asmachta. So you could explain, he says, that it's biyadai mamish, right? Like we tried explaining Rashi. And if it's biyadai mamish, he says, maybe we could follow the shitta of Hai going. What does Rav Hai hold? That when it's biyadai fully, and there is no gazim, there's no exaggeration, then really, it's not an asmachta. Yeah? But it's, why by certain cases we do apply asmachta? It's a takana. And when was this takana established? When this tanai is goyim a hefset to somebody. Then we say it's an asmachta. Not because biyadai or any biyadai, because guzma or any guzma. We made it takana because of the loss. So therefore, when it's biyadai and there's no guzma, l'cha'ira, it should not be an asmachta. But in certain scenarios, we do make it an asmachta when there's a loss. So in the case of ilvo al sadeyu, when there is no loss because there was no guzma, even if it's biyadai mamash, we say it's not. We don't have that takana. Yeah, that's essentially what the Tzemach Tzedek says in these two long paragraphs. But again, I went through it twice. It's not 100% clear in my mind, so hopefully I didn't mess it up too badly. This takana is says by biyadai v'lo biyadai for sure, but even by biyadai legamri v'lo gazim. Yes, that's what he says. Yeah. Now that is essentially what I wanted to talk about in Sif Yud Gimel. From Sif Yud Daled onwards, Sif Yud Daled Tezvav is about me'achshav and bezdin chashav. And that I'm going to deal with in Mitzvah Hashem in the next year, which, hold on one second, it's not going to be tomorrow, I think it's going to be Wednesday, and then I guess it's going to be two, maybe, hope not more than two more shurim on Seif Reish Zayin.